Procedural question. The articles come over today. The Senate immediately goes into impeachment trial format, right?
That's right. Yep.
So
Well,
if President
that's not
Trump,
entirely right. It's not entirely right. So what will happen is they'll receive the articles tonight. I believe they'll be read tonight, although I can't exactly remember. The jurors will be sworn. The Senate will be sworn in tomorrow, and then they lay out the timeline for the president to submit his brief. So listen, it's not going to be in full swing until the second week of February, but for all intents and purposes, tonight is when the process starts.
so when they actually sit as the 100, and you have to be at your desk, that whole stuff that we went through a year ago, kangaroo court, in my opinion, not yours, they have to sit down at their desk. At that moment, if President Trump sues to enjoin the proceeding, which I think he ought to do as unconstitutional, does it freeze the Senate during the pendency of the court proceedings in federal court as to whether or not the body is constitutionally in process?
You're the lawyer, Hugh, but I would imagine it does. But you want to know what's interesting? I was talking to somebody who was on this call the other day with the Senate Republicans, and they don't seem interested in going to court. And I don't know, because usually we all have a good window into what the president's thinking because he has people around him who are willing and eager to talk to the press and explain how he's feeling. I'm not talking about leak. I just want to know basic questions like, does he want to go to court? How does he plan on defending himself? Who's working the Hill for him? Things like that. We don't have that this time around just because, he doesn't have people working for him in the same way that he used to. So I don't know what he's thinking, but I would imagine everybody that I talk to who's anti-impeachment. By the way, Mitt Romney, who you thought would think it was unconstitutional, he said yesterday it was constitutional. So there's just I'm not saying that as a rejoinder to you. I'm just saying that people are all over the place here.
No, I was surprised by Senator Romney because it is clearly unconstitutional, and he's a good lawyer. But, everyone's going to take their position. What I think, though, is interesting. Like an NFL coach, you don't show your game plan. So this lawyer that he's hired that Lindsey Graham thinks high of, I don't know. I wouldn't tell anyone what I was going to do. I would wait till they began. Then I would seek to enjoin the proceeding. And I believe it will freeze the proceeding and freeze the Senate under its rules. Because once begun, it's supposed to be it's supposed to go on until it's done.
Yes, but they could split their business, and they seem to have an agreement that they are going to split their business, an agreement between Schumer and McConnell, which we actually broke in Punchbowl PM on Friday night, an agreement that basically says they're going to have this time period between this Tuesday, so tomorrow, and February, 8th, I think it is, the Monday, February 8th. So there are a couple weeks, but listen, if he goes to court I would imagine that he could go to court anytime after tonight at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. when they get the articles over there.
Yeah, but that's not what if I were king of the forest, not queen, not duke, not earl, I'd let them start and go into continuous proceeding. Then I would sue to enjoin in order to freeze the Senate and gum up the works. Because I don't believe the Senate will proceed during the pendency of an issue on jurisdiction, because I don't think they have jurisdiction.
Would they go directly to the Supreme Court? Is that how it would work?
No. Start in the District Court of Florida, go to the 11th Circuit, which is 8-4 Trump appointees for an en banc hearing, or 8-4 Republican appointees for an en banc hearing, and then get it. It would take months, maybe weeks, but I think months. And the Senate, I believe, would be frozen. So that's, if I'm calling the plays, that's how I'd run it, like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did yesterday. By the way, were you upset they didn't go for it on fourth down, the Packers?
Yeah, I thought it was stupid, but I didn't really have a rooting interest besides Jim Vandehei, my friend, who's a big Packers fan. I'd like to see them lose just to see him upset. But
I pretty much approached the game that way. I wanted Tampa Bay to win so that Belichick would be proven to have been an appendage to Brady and not the other way around. But we also know the Browns were clearly the better team than the Bills, and they were jobbed by the refs against the Chiefs. So it should be a Browns-Bucks Super Bowl, but I digress. Let's go to Punchbowl News this morning. Own goal by the Democrats. Your reporting is elaborating on something the Washington Post began this morning, but you have much more depth. They're not going to get anything through at this pace, especially with impeachment. Would you explain to people why not?
Well, I think, and I was just texting with a reporter friend of mine who made the point that the left is going to be crazy with Biden by March 1st because he's putting forth a $2 trillion COVID relief deal. Let's actually just put aside the substance for a second and not even have an opinion on that. Getting a $2 trillion bill through this tight Congress is going to be difficult. And people think, well, we could do it on reconciliation. Reconciliation, the budget maneuver that only requires 51 votes in the Senate, it is time-consuming. It is hard. It's not easy. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and we're already basically at the end of January. So I just think that, listen, once a budget comes to the floor of the Senate, you know this well, Hugh, it's subject to what we call a vote-a-rama. Could be potentially thousands of amendments to the budget, which have to be considered on the floor. Not all of them, but many of them have to be considered on the floor. And then you have to go through what's called the Byrd process, which is a budget process that strikes out some of the provisions in your bill. So it's just not as easy as people think. If I were the Democrats, and I could have opinions like this now that I'm at my own news outlet and I don't answer to anybody, but this is not an opinion based on partisan politics, it's an opinion based on strategy. If I were the Democrats and you want to get something done, you do basically vaccine money and maybe direct checks and get that out the door immediately. And you would be able to get that through the Senate. I am relatively certain about that.
Can I amend the Sherman proposal, with which I agree?
Sure.
I would also dismiss impeachment, so I had every day, all day, and I would add to your two things a small tax on dreamers, $5, in order to make it a budget matter and get them status. Because then I think it survives the Byrd rule if you have a revenue generation or a revenue impact. That's how they use reconciliation to get rid of the Obamacare tax. And therefore, they could get immigration and vaccine money and relief money and have a big win in the 100 days. But the road they're going down now with impeachment and reconciliation and $2 billion, you are absolutely right. They will not get it done.
I don't even think I would even argue. So I would amend your proposal. I don't actually. First of all, they're never going to get rid of impeachment. They're just not going to do it. It's just not. It's not. It's not. They're not. They're just not going to do it. But I actually think they could get something done even with impeachment if they pared back their proposal. I mean, and I'm not suggesting that this isn't a good place to start. It probably is. If you're Biden, you start with 100 and you settle at 75% or 60% or 55%, wherever you end up, and you're happy with it and you're fine with it. I just think, it gets difficult at $2 trillion. You're already hearing people who are willing to spend money. Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski. I don't know if Lisa Murkowski does anything, but Todd
Joe
Johnson,
Manchin.
Cycle.
Yeah.
They're saying it's too much. It's too much money, and it's not targeted enough. And I understand that. You start off at 100, but remember, when you start off at 100, does the left in the House let you out if you pare back? Does the left in the Senate, Bernie Sanders, the budget chairman? I mean, there's just a lot of it's a minefield, and it's really not easy.
And you need to focus like a laser. That's why the impeachment is so stupid. Now, Jake, I want to ask you about Ron Klain. I have a theory that the hardest job in Washington, well, there are two of them. One is the National Security Advisor and the other is Chief of Staff. And the Chief of Staff in the past has sometimes come in, I think of Mac McClarty, who had no government experience, and Reince Priebus, who had vast political experience but no executive office experience, as opposed to Jim Baker. Baker was very effective. McClarty and Reince less so. Ron Klain is in the Jim Baker mode. So he very smartly went on Meet the Press yesterday and walked back the underlings. They left us nothing because, if you go over to the CDC tracker, there are 41 million doses distributed and 22 million administered. He knew not to get involved in that. He cut that, he just stopped the bleeding there. He's a very smart chief of staff. I think that's a huge advantage for Team Biden.
Huge. He understands government, right? And that's important because you can't disdain the institution that you're purporting to lead or you need to lead, right? I mean, understands the levers of power. I mean, has been chief of staff to two vice presidents, has worked on the Hill, has run campaigns, has been a lobbyist, he's been in the private sector. He gets it. I would say, I think what they were trying to say is that there is no national strategy for dispersing the vaccine, which I think is the fairest criticism, right? I mean, Trump even said we're leaving it up to states, and I think that's a fine, strategy. I think that's what Biden and the team was trying to say. But they didn't say that. They said there's no strategy, which is not really true. I mean, there is a strategy. It might not be the strategy that you would have employed, but Klain understands. Remember, Klain, obviously, as you know, ran the Ebola stuff. He's kind
very
of
smart on this stuff. And he does not need to make exaggerated claims. He needs to stop the virus. He's very concerned about it, too. He actually knows epidemiology and that stuff. So I thought that was a show of competence that is welcome by both sides. And he's going to be the face of the administration when it's not the president. That's my theory. What do you think of that?
Yep. I think you're right. We're actually going to launch something, I think, at the end of this week or early next week. We're doing a little series on the first 100 days in Punchbowl, and Klain is one of the first people we're showcasing. So we think he's going to be obviously very critical, and we think highly of his experience, and think he's not only we don't really think highly, but everyone we talk to thinks highly. And
yeah, I mean,
him.
I'm part of the Ron Klain fan club, even though our politics are opposite. Last question: the Merrick Garland team at Justice is very credentialed, but they have not announced the Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust. And I'm watching that very closely because if it's someone with big tech ties, it's a terrible conflict of interest because all they have to do. Jake, I have a fun fact to know and tell that I learned this weekend from Shoshana Rodoff's book, The Rise of Surveillance Capitalism. Do you know that 5% of apps, or between 4 and 6% of apps on your phone, include the ability to turn on your voice recording without you knowing it?
Crazy, yeah. I'm scared to death about all this stuff. So whenever I talk to you about it, it freaks me out. I will say this, Hugh, and I think you know this as well, and I think you'd agree with me. There is bipartisan concern about big tech stuff on the Hill, and there's only it's only a matter of time before this really rears its head in a big way, I think, personally.
Watch that AAG for antitrust, Jake. That's where the combat will be. Jake Sherman of PunchbowlNews.com. Thank you. Everyone should get Punchbowl News in the morning. Everyone. Time for